What's the most denial you've ever seen someone in? Story 1. My parents, on 2 fronts. For some background, my parents are abusive jerkwads. I've had almost no contact with them for years, and my life is better for it. And I'm a much better person without their trash hanging over me. Last year, they fell in with a money-forwarding scammer. I haven't heard the entirety of this story, but it involved promises of tens of millions of dollars for a small outlay on their part. Of course, they lost their small outlay, which was in the tens of thousands. Apparently, most of this I'm repeating secondhand from a cousin who keeps an eye out for anything weird for them, so I'm prepared. They then realized this person was scamming them and have been working tirelessly at trying to out-scam the scammer and achieve access to his tens of millions, without the slightest thought that the tens of millions doesn't exist. Then they tried to reestablish contact with me. They didn't mention anything about the money at the time, but added the usual bizarre restrictions on us meeting face to face. I would wear certain clothes, my girlfriend would wear a correct hairstyle and clothing, etc., and behave a certain way. All the usual stuff they used to pull on me when growing up. Soon after that, when I found out about their money issues, they tried a second time to reestablish contact, along with demands for cash and asking who owned the house I was living in so they could use it as collateral for a small business issue. I told them to take off. The most recent news I have, as of last month, is they've not only lost the family home and an investment property I was unaware of, but they're up to their eyeballs in debt, have borrowed metric tons from friends and other family, all going towards this scammer in an attempt to get their money back. Their total debt is now well over $400,000. If I were to sum up the source of their problems when I was growing up, is that they're total control freaks. And if anything or anyone steps out of their decided control arena, they will sacrifice everything to get them back in. Their denial is complete in that they still think they have a hope of returning their money, and on the second front, in that they believe I'll help them throw more at the problem. Asking who owned the house I was living in so they could use it as collateral for a small business issue? Wow. That's just grifting 101. It can be boiled down to, hey, I will promise you this big thing if you just give me this small thing now. There never is a big thing. Not later, not ever. They're just trying to get you to give them the small thing. Story 2. I and HR had to let an employee go due to poor performance and shoddy workmanship. The guy was one of those know-it-alls that in actuality only knew enough to make him dangerous. I had been watching the guy on the assembly line, keeping an ongoing list of royal mess-ups he made on a day-to-day basis. We suddenly had product that was shipped to a distributor and a component was incorrectly built and shipped with this guy's signature all over the paperwork. I had to sit down the entire team and have a heart-to-heart, yelling, about what had happened. During the meeting, without him knowing we had been watching him for weeks, and the mess-up he made was the last straw, this jerkwad decides to start throwing all his coworkers under the bus because he knows what he's doing, and obviously there's an issue with the rest of these folks. Well, flash forward to the following Monday, and I call him into the HR office, and we explain that we are going to be letting him go, and this is the reasoning, etc. Eyes bigger than saucers, and proceeds to tell us our company does not know how to run a business, and he's only been a benefit since he started. Keep in mind, this guy had worked for us for around 8 months. He was the ripe old age of 22, and this company has been around 20-plus profitable years with 0 assembly issues, until the last 8 months or so. So I had to escort him out of the building after he signed some paperwork, and he argues with me all the way to the parking lot that we are making a big mistake. He should be in charge. Well, I'm sure this guy is still walking around denying the fact that he is a jerkwad, and we have not had assembly issues since that day. Cheers! I fired about 8 people in my 12 years at my job. Half of them were exactly this way. The other half just shrugged and knew they had messed up. I worked with someone like this. I was working this job at an ad agency as a temp, and they brought in this other temp to come in, and this person just started acting like they were my superior. I had to go to my bosses and say, "Is this person hired to give me orders?" And they said, "No, what are you talking about?" That person didn't last that long after that. Story 3. Hope this applies, but I volunteer as an EMT. This one shift, we got a call about a pungent smell coming from an elderly couple's apartment. Dispatch assumed it was a gas leak, and the protocol for handling such cases states that there has to be an EM team on the scene, ergo us, the EMTs. We show up at the address and follow the stench into a small rundown apartment. The door is cracked open, so we walk in. An alarmed geriatric welcomed us. He claims all is in order and politely shows us towards the exit. Alas, as we turn to leave, I catch a whiff of the most vile and putrid stench to have ever existed. One to make an anosmic tear up. There's a word there I don't know, anosmic. It takes all of my zen not to go into a feat of projectile vomiting. At this point, we're all gagging, so it's clear that we've come to the right place. The head paramedic quickly tracks the scent to the bedroom. Inside, strewn, yes, strewn, on the bed is a badly decayed body of a woman lying in a puddle of brown fluid. The eye sockets and every other cavity are infested with maggots. Very gruesome. The man, however, seemed nonchalant and completely oblivious to the presence of a partially decomposed corpse in his bed. Furthermore, he was convinced she was still alive and seemed pretty ticked at us for claiming otherwise. He went on to have a full conversation with the body while we filled out paperwork. A pathologist in the morgue of a hospital we frequent later told us the deceased lady's husband had S3 Alzheimer's disease. He was suffering from anosognosia. You'll have to let me know if I pronounce that right. Anosognosia, refusing to believe he was ill and that his wife was unalive. It was a sad day. That is the saddest thing I've ever heard. The other people in these stories so far really don't have anything to blame. This person, unfortunately, really needs help. I hope they do get the help they need. Story 4. My mother is convinced that someone keeps breaking into her house but never steals anything. This has been going on for at least 30 years. I grew up thinking she was just savvy. Doing things like pushing the couch in front of the door while we sneak out a more obscure entry made sense to me growing up. Now she has cameras all around and in her house with a constant recorded feed to one of those black and white split screens. A couple of years ago was when I realized how irrational it is. She told me, "It happened again. They came into the house again. I had just vacuumed, and when I came home, there were dusty footprints on the carpet." Me. "Well, you have the cameras now. Did you look to see who it is?" Her. "I tried, but they backed up the film and recorded over the part with them on it." Me. "But the cameras were recording when you got home?" Her. "Yes." Me. "Okay, then you caught them leaving the house." Her. "I told you already. They recorded over the parts with them on film." Me. "That's possible for when they came in, but if the cameras were still going, they would have caught them leaving. They can't record over it after they've left." She looked at me as if I'm the idiot. In a slow voice, with every word emphasized, "I told you. They rewinded the film and recorded over it." That's when I knew there's no reasoning with crazy. Story 5. Seriously, every time I tell this story, people say it's hogwash. I went to visit a friend. His dad owns a restaurant and they live behind a restaurant. I got there and it was still opening. It's a nighttime restaurant. The waitress told me to wait at a table because my friend would be there in a minute. She told me I could order anything, so I asked for a water bottle. When she brought it, I read it before opening. It said it was sparkling water. We call it water with gas in Brazil. Then it went like this. Me: "Hey, I'd like regular water, please." Her: "That one is regular." Me: "No, it says sparkling water." Her: "The label came wrong on those bottles. It's regular." Okay, so I opened it. It made that gas sound, like when you open a soda bottle. Me: "It's sparkling water." It made the sound. Her: "No, it's not. Relax." Me: "But it made the sound. It's not regular water." Her: "It's not what you think." For Pete's sake, I drank it. It was sparkling water. Shocking. Me: "It's sparkling water. Can I have a regular water, please?" Her: "No, it's not. You're imagining things. Just drink it." What the hell is going on? Me: "Are you serious? Please, I'd like a regular one." Her: "That one is the regular one. It's not sparkling water." That moment, my friend arrived and we left. That's not denial, that is just being moronic. Story 6. I work at a university in records. One thing that's important to remember is that one of our main responsibilities is maintaining and issuing transcripts. At least half of everything we do is directly related to transcripts, either in the form of insurance accuracy or tracking and updating information. So when a student finds out she cannot graduate because she didn't even bother to take like 5 courses she needs, and then badly photoshops a set of transcripts and emails those back to us to claim that our records were wrong because she had transcripts showing that she had taken and passed the courses, well, needless to say, nobody fell for it. Not to say she didn't do a decent job of faking it, but she forgot to recalculate her GPA to reflect her new A's. Really? A's? Don't you know anything about cheating? Never give yourself A's. And it matched her prior GPA. This isn't the denial part yet, though. This girl truly believed she would convince us. She just kept insisting that we were mistaken. So she had her parents come talk to the bigwigs, and the whole time they met with the bigwigs, the parents just kept saying, "Well, we think our daughter is right. Who would lie to their family and have them fly all this way out here and waste all this money? Why would anyone do that? You guys have made a mistake. Hate to burst your bubble, guys, but, How much you want to bet this person had a deal with their parents for some sort of security or monetary gain or some sort of job or promise of something if she were to graduate at that time, and that's why they flew out? I think that way she would have had no problem wasting their time flying out if she had faked the passports. Is that what you think? Let me know in the comments. Story 7. This is about to get depressing. Pediatric ICU nurse here. We have had a patient on our unit for what is almost a year now. The patient has had multiple codes and unfortunately now has seemingly no coordinated thoughts or movements. The patient still opens his eyes, blinks, and yawns, but there's no purpose behind these activities. The patient had all the neurologic tests. The patient has random neurologic fevers regularly, which are clearly uncomfortable. Their HR increases, blood pressure increases. These are indicators of discomfort or pain. The parents are in severe denial that in letting their child peacefully go would be the best option. The patient has zero chance of ever leaving our ICU, as the patient wouldn't be able to survive in any other setting. I overheard the social worker the other day mention that the cost of the patient's stay in the hospital is in excess of $50 million. Mom and dad are uninsured. The patient just lays in bed getting fed through a tube and has the ventilator do all the breathing for them. Mom and dad are incredibly controlling and don't think we're doing enough to take care of their vegetable child. They spend their time placing pillows under every portion of their child's body. It's heartbreaking for the staff, and it's taken a great toll on every one of us. Story 8. This may be more of delusion than denial, but this former, thank Jeebus, coworker of mine, he thought he was the best at everything in both work and life, when in fact, he was dangerously inept. He would make code changes without validating they worked, then strut around like he just won something while servers crashed. He applied many times for the senior position on my team before accepting the analyst spot. I was hired in the senior position, and he never liked me, which is fine. I hated him. I once heard him tell a coworker of his getting passed over for that position and saying, "Well, Michael Jordan was drafted second." He informed anyone who listened that he was captain of both his high school's basketball and football teams because I was so scrappy. He was around 5'6" and had a gut like a pregnant woman. He also said he quit baseball because it was too easy, that he was hitting off of a pitching machine throwing 100 miles per hour when he was 12. He finally quit after he was passed over for promotion again. One of the hardest working people on the team got it, and because she was Indian and a woman, he claimed he was being discriminated against, completely in denial that he was awful at his job. And he was wrong. Jordan was picked third. Story 9. My sister got pregnant as a teenager, and my parents forbid her from speaking with the father. My dad put a recorder on the phone line and then played a very private conversation between her and the father in front of the whole family just before they kicked her out. As my sister dragged her possessions outside in garbage bags, while she was crying, my mom threw the last bag out the door after saying to her, "I hope you enjoy welfare, shrew," and then slammed the door shut behind her. Years later, my mom was crying to me about how my sister won't talk to her and she never gets to see her grandchild. I told her that was the consequences of kicking her out, and my mom snapped at me, "I didn't kick her out. I begged her to stay." I called my sister up to confirm, and yeah, Mom, you kicked her out. Too long didn't read. My parents kicked my sister out for getting pregnant. Years later, my mom insists she begged her not to leave. Story 10. My grandmother in assessing my grandfather's Alzheimer's. For years, she would say he was forgetful until he was diagnosed and had already been through the stages. Then, as it continued to progress, she would just say he was having a spell or episode. She finally put him in a home where he is unresponsive, can't move or eat on his own. He doesn't talk. He looks like he's been long gone. He had been to the hospital several times, and she refuses to bring his DNR to the hospital because she believes any day he will snap out of it. Not to mention, he still needs his leg amputated, but she has gone to 5 or 6 second opinions, still not hearing what she wants. A patient of mine had advanced ALS to the point where he couldn't move, was trached to a vent, had a feeding tube for nutrition, and could barely communicate. His wife is still convinced he's going to get up one day and mow the lawn like nothing ever happened.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. My sister was in denial about her illicit substance problem right up to the point where her heart stopped because of it. For years, she would steal money and prescription drugs from both myself and my mother while denying it. I caught her over and over again. The most pathetic scene that sticks out in my mind is finding her stuck halfway through the cat door in my mom's bedroom door, which she had locked to keep my sister out of her pills and money. She was just stuck there, writhing back and forth pathetically. I begged her over and over again to get help, but she refused to even see she had a problem and said I was the one with the problem. So dang sad. She was only 24 when she passed away on her way home from the bar. Her heart stopped from a mix of the alcohol and prescription substances in her system. I'm so sorry. That must have been awful for you and your family. Story 12. In the mirror. As a 22-year-old headed to vet school, I was dating an abusive pathological liar who had borrowed $4K of my student loan money. Every member of my family and close friends hated him. He lied about literally everything. I kept convincing myself he was damaged by his early life in foster care and was a good person underneath. With enough love and support, he'd turn his life around. Instead, he destroyed my self-esteem and faith in others, cheated, took every available dime, and almost cost me my education and friends. Thank the deity I got away from him in time and didn't end up pregnant or hurt or unalived. Whenever I think about that time, I am amazed anyone stuck by me through that scat storm and my hardcore denial of who he was. Holy hell, that's awful. So glad you got out of that situation, though. It's only uphill from here. Story 13. A girl I was friends with in high school denied being pregnant for her entire pregnancy. Even after she had the baby, she posted to Facebook saying she received the biggest surprise of her life. She was a thin girl. She was noticeably pregnant. Another friend and I confronted her about it, telling her she needed to go to the doctor, that what she was doing wasn't healthy for her or the baby. She was doing things that a pregnant woman should not be doing. She refused to acknowledge it, saying she was just getting fat. Luckily, the baby was completely healthy, but we're no longer friends because of that situation. This happens more than you might expect. It's a rare form of delusion where they don't notice the symptoms or they ignore them. Wikipedia says it makes up 0.26% of all deliveries. Story 14. When I was young, one of my friends passed away by doing a belly flop off a high ledge into a lake. It ruptured his aorta, from what I recall. He was 17. He had a younger brother who was completely destroyed by his passing. We lived in a very, very small and rural community, and everyone knew everyone else, so people sort of gathered around him to help him cope. He returned to school pretty quickly after his brother's funeral, and I remember hearing him talk about how his brother used to climb trees with him, and he'd correct himself immediately. He will climb trees with me this summer. This went on for months. Nobody knew what to do, so we all just sort of smiled and nodded along when he talked like that. That's like the saddest thing I've ever heard. Story 15. I'm a lawyer. I represented a woman who was sued for wrongful termination by the family of a passenger unalived in the other car. The other car was driven by the deceased woman's brother. The deceased woman's brother was actually the one at fault for the accident, but the family could not accept that. The state police concluded after performing an accident reconstruction that the brother was at fault, and there were independent witnesses who stated that the brother was at fault. No matter how much evidence against him there was, the family could not accept it. I left the firm before the conclusion of the case, so I don't know how it panned out. Story 16. A guy I know is an EMT, gets to the scene of a terrible accident. The people in the cars are told not to move until an EMT can evaluate them. One of the drivers becomes irate and gets out of his car arguing that he is fine and has places to be. The EMTs explain that he might be suffering from shock and the adrenaline is masking any pain he might have from serious injuries, and to please wait for an evaluation. He continues to argue, then he turns around to go back to his car. While turning around, he turns his neck, snaps his spine, and drops unalive. Story 17. So many people, particularly my grandparents, told me my father's passing was an accident. He had gotten a rifle out of hiding, one that we didn't even know he had, laid down on a swing in our front yard, and blew his brains out. Seems pretty deliberate to me. My cousin jumped out of a moving car on the 110 freeway in LA. His dad still thinks it wasn't self-unaliving. My uncle shot himself in the head. His brother insists that he was a pilot for U.S. black sites and had personally transported Osama bin Laden to the U.S., so he was eliminated. Story 18. Had someone explain to me that the reason the KKK was formed was because after slaves were freed, they were all running around physically violating all the white women. So the KKK was formed as a way of protection or some trash. They were, still are, in heavy denial of how widespread racism is or was throughout history and today. That is the plot of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. I didn't know that the first time I watched it. I only knew it was influential on a technical level. It was quite a surprise. Story 19. Woman I know thinks the nursing staff in the NICU hates her, and it's definitely because she was giving her baby up for adoption. It couldn't possibly be that the baby was there because it was undergoing supervised withdrawal from the cocktail of illicit substances she filled herself with while pregnant. In sex ed, we actually watched a video on babies going through withdrawal symptoms. It was so heartbreaking to watch. It breaks my heart that someone won't get help for their substance problem once they find out they're pregnant. Story 20. Not particularly bad or anything, but a few years back I was at a mountain resort with my friend and his family, and our rental house had a pretty big backyard. Anyway, one day we were playing football, and he threw it too high and it got stuck in a tree. And when he went to climb it, he got his leg stuck, and his dad had to come cut the branch off to free his leg. To this day, he insists that it was me and not him. Story 21. I know it'll be generic, but me when I was being cheated on. I saw the signs. I should have known better, but I just branded myself as paranoid till I walked in on it. That's a double-edged sword, though. I've had relationships where I was cheated on and tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I've had relationships where I came off as paranoid when I wasn't actually being cheated on. It's best to trust until you unfortunately do have proof. Story 22. My wife went to college with someone who was like Rachel Dolezal, except that instead of pretending to be black, he pretended to be Native American. He went all in, insisting that people call him by his tribal name. His dorm was completely decorated in a Native American style, and he tried to dress the part too. He was very similarly discovered to be making it all up and ended up dropping out of college. Story 23. My grandmother, Dad's mom, insisted that my sister was conceived out of wedlock and that Mom was pregnant at the wedding because my mom was a Catholic hussy. Yeah, you figure that one out. My parents were married in 1973. My sister was born in 1978. Well, maybe it was one of those delayed pregnancies where the seed was planted back in 73 but didn't bloom until 78 due to drought conditions. Story 24. A friend of mine passed away last February of cancer, and another friend of mine is convinced he's still alive, but he dropped out of school and is ignoring him. It's super sad, honestly. That is incredibly sad. I'm so sorry for your loss. Denial is a stage of grief after all. Hopefully your friend will get some help and come to terms with what happened. Story 25. My mother-in-law's deadbeat boyfriend told her he was a decorated war hero. We checked his army records, and it said he attended basic training, and that was it. We told her that meant he didn't go any further and his stories were a lie. And she said, no, this proves that he went into secret sniper training like he said. Story 26. A female friend of mine dated this guy for a year. She kept asking our male friends for advice on how to get her boyfriend to have physical intimacy with her without having to watch videos of men working out. He also would only do her from behind. I had no idea how to handle that situation. That's a bulletproof closet right there. Story 27. My grandmother is a very old-school Christian, and one of her lifelong friends has been living with another woman for over 30 years and hasn't dated a man ever. She gets incredibly upset if you say that her friend is a lesbian. She will walk away and say nothing. It's just her roommate. They are just really close friends. Story 28. I know this dude named Floyd. He was 56 years old and was in a relationship with a woman who was 26, the age of his oldest daughter. She was an H addict who had blown his retirement on illicit substances. He couldn't admit that the relationship was unhealthy. It was both heartbreaking and disgusting at the same time. Story 29. Well, my grandmother, who is a raging alcoholic, told me that if you mix cranberry with vodka, it isn't considered alcoholic anymore. It's juice. Wine wasn't alcoholic either because it was made from grapes. She was quite confused about fruits. She might have just been drunk. Story 30. Super right-wing Rush Limbaugh-loving in-law. Before he lost his job, out of work for over a year now, the unemployed are lazy, especially if they're black or illegal immigrants. Yes, they're lazy, even if they want our jibs. After he lost his job, I'm unemployed because Obama. Story 31. I have a friend who's in a relationship with a guy for 8 months that no one has ever met. We haven't met him because he's so busy, and they only hang out at night. She thinks this is her boyfriend. We think he's married. Story 32. Our religion has 7 leaders in New York who make up all the rules and claim they're based on scripture, grub for money, and refuse to be questioned. But we don't worship them. We worship God. Story 33. That would be myself when I was a junkie. Not that I knew it then, but when I got clean, I'm still finding paraphernalia around the apartment. I thought it wasn't that bad because I wasn't an IV user. Story 34. I don't have that much casual spicy time, she said, cutting the crotch out of all her tights so she wouldn't have to take her clothes off to smash in public. Former roommate. I miss her antics sometimes. Story 35. Me, looking through this thread for 20 freaking minutes in denial of the fact that this thread is so horribly depressing and I should go to bed before reading more. I'll be fine, though. Just one more. Story 36. Any parent with a child who has undiagnosed behavioral issues. The lengths they will go to blame everyone else is incredible. Or parents who blame all their child's misbehaving on the disorder, leaving the child guilt-free. Story 37. Ex-girlfriend's dad would never admit or acknowledge that his son was severely autistic. Always talked to him like a normal person and got mad when he didn't have the answer to his questions.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.